Hello, my name is Kiama Mugambi, and I'm the editorial manager at Africa Theological Network Press. And I want to talk a little bit about writing clearly. And in this session, we're going to be talking about how we can overcome common mistakes that African scholars make as they write. And this could be for students, this could be for you if you're a student, this could be for you if you're just coming into scholarly writing, or perhaps you're a seasoned scholarly writer and you just need to listen to this. So this is for you. I've said elsewhere that the challenge that African scholars have in their writing really does not lie with the content. I think African scholars have so much to say to one another and to say to the rest of the world in different fields, whether it is in theological writing or social sciences, in philosophy, in psychology, any field you can imagine. We have something that we can share with others. But someone would then ask, how writing our journal articles don't make it through? How come people have negative things to say about our scholarly writing and even about our own scholarship in academia here? Other problems notwithstanding, I think there are problems of some of the global inequalities that filter into academia. But I think the big problem that we can own and that we should consider is that our writing problems really are that we are not able to write clearly, or it is difficult for us to write clearly. And in this particular session, my hope is to point out some of the things that we could do to become better writers. The solution really is for us to own the problem, to practice, to make sure that we are writing. Whenever we write papers, if we are students, the papers that we write, we can look back at them and critique them ourselves. Self-editing, making sure that as we are writing, we are editing for ourselves and asking ourselves the question, what is the reader going to get out of this? And then one of the things I found very helpful, that has helped me in the past, is editing other people's work. And this could be in class, where we would give our assignments, or if we are doing a thesis, share our chapters with someone else, and they read it for us, or they share their chapter with us, and we can read it and edit it. In editing someone else's work, sometimes you get better at your own writing, because then you sit in the shoes of the reader and you can begin to ask yourself questions. So I'm going to be wearing different hats as I share this session with you. First of all, I'm a teacher. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy working with students at various levels. It's a passion of mine that I have been involved in for many years. But part of my work also, as I said earlier, is that I'm an editor with the African Theological Network Press, which is an organization that has recently started so that we could enhance scholarly writing in the field of theology and theological studies on the continent. But I'm also going to be putting on my own hat of personal experience. I have written a number of publications, journal articles, books for use in different contexts, and even academic material. And some of the things I'll be talking about are things that I have experienced myself. They are mistakes that I have made myself, and mistakes that I've seen my fellow African scholars make. And my hope is that you will be able to learn something out of that. My primary audience, as I talk to you, I'm going to be assuming that you're a writer or a scholar or a student who's from the continent, and who wants to improve their writing. but who faces certain unique challenges, and that is that you're from the continent, you want to write well. English is only one of several languages that you use, and so my hope is that some of these things that I point out will be helpful for you. This may not be very helpful for someone who, you know, is a native English speaker, someone who, for whom, you know, this is, you know, English is a language, or even French, you know, is their first language, and who comes from a context where you know, the language at home is the language, or the language on the street is the language that that you write in, that you reflect theologically in, or reflect as a scholar in. So I'll outline five challenges, five common problems that we have as African writers and scholars. These are all problems or challenges that I have had myself, and as I speak to you, I'm also speaking to myself and reminding myself. The first one is verbiosity. I'll explain them in a moment. Cliche words and phrases, unclear reference, what I am going to generally call mother tongue influence, and I'll explain what that is, and then indecisive sentences. I'm not sure that that is actually a phrase in English language, but I'm coining that phrase just to help point out the challenges for us. So verbiosity is when one uses or expresses themselves in more words than are needed. I am not sure where that problem came from, but I have seen it in a lot. I've seen it in my own writing, and I've seen it in you know, a lot of other writing, especially scholarly writing at university level, undergraduate, postgraduate, and so on. And for some reason, I remember having a chat with someone a few weeks ago, and they said that there's a sense that when someone, you know, writes more words and uses more terminology, then their writing is more scholarly. Yet, you know, some of my favorite authors write do not use big words. They explain everything they want to say, and they are able to communicate profound truths using simple language. So verbiosity. The other one is cliche words and phrases. A cliche is a phrase or opinion that is overused. It's used so much that you know, it ends up being very predictable, or sometimes it even looks like, you know, it's an original. It shows, it seems to indicate that the person has not really thought so much about what they are saying. So cliche words and phrases. Unclear reference. So a referent is a thing, the thing in the world that a particular phrase denotes. So when, for example, I use the word them, and so them is a word, but it represents a physical thing. So them could be people, it could be a particular class, or it could be a particular gathering, and so that's the reference, that's the real thing that them represents. And oftentimes, you know, we use we use words and the referent is unclear, so we don't know what them refers to, or we don't know what they refers to, or we don't know what it refers to. That's a mistake I tend to make quite often. Mother tongue influence, and this is the influence of the author's linguistic background. This is where languages, and in Africa we have so many different languages, hundreds of languages, and the languages organize their words differently. And because of the way the words are organized in the languages that we speak, sometimes when we write as authors, that influence comes into our writing, and I find as a speaker of several Bantu languages, the way I think and the way I speak in some of the Bantu languages filters through. So I write English as if I am speaking in Kiswahili or Kiembu or Kikuyu. The fifth issue is indecisive sentences, and I'm going to describe those as sentences that do not clearly point to a particular thought. Sentences that are ambivalent, they could mean different things, or they try to include so many different meanings within the sentence to try to cover all the bases. A good sentence refers to a particular thing. As we used to be taught, a good sentence has a subject and a predicate. It has a noun and a verb. It has, someone doing something or something happening. But sometimes we have sentences that have too many things going on. There are too many people doing too many different things, or wanting too many things, or thinking too many ideas within a sentence. And these five things contribute to lack of clarity. Someone from your own context might be able to understand or vaguely understand what you're trying to say. But when you take that piece of writing, when you take my piece of writing and you take it to West Africa, where languages work differently, then a different kind of meaning will be conveyed there. When I take this writing to North Africa, or when I take it to South America, to Brazil, someone who knows English but does not know enough of it, my writing will be hard for them to read because they will not be able to easily get meaning out of it. So now that you know what the five challenges are, we're going to put those in practice, and we're going to look at a paragraph. And this is a paragraph that is written, would be a typical paragraph. I'll read it out aloud. Basically, in the African context, where there are always a diverse number of ethnic groups within each nation state, social conflict can easily emerge. Obviously, they cannot be fully documented, but it is clear from the available research, literature itself, that there is a problem of violence. In some countries, brutal violence was meted out against civilians by militia groups and government forces themselves. They lost their lives or got physically injured. Some had their limbs cut off. Perhaps root of the crisis is that these existing types and levels of conflicts and disharmonies diminish or threaten human dignity for all. My assumption is that as you listen to this, you probably can figure out what this person is saying. You can understand it, you can see the meaning behind. You probably are following the argument and are able to understand it. And so the meaning is not really lost. But I would say if you took this paragraph and this paragraph went around the world, if you took this paragraph and took it to an international journal, or you took this paragraph and took it to a place where English is a scholarly language, a second or a third scholarly language. You took it to the Far East, or you took it to Latin America. It might not be considered as something that is easy to read. It does sound somewhat academic, but it is not clear. It is not a clear piece of writing. And sometimes when I look back at some of the papers that I have written, when I look back at some of the pieces of writing that I have done, I can see these challenges. And so what I'm going to do, I had color coded the pieces of the challenges, and red is for verbiosity, green is for the cliche words, blue for the reference and clear reference, and the dark greenish is for mother tongue influence, and the purple color is for indecisive sentences. So I'm going to present this paragraph with those challenges in mind. So this is what it looks like. If it is if I've processed this writing, and I'm going to break it down into four segments, and we're going to talk through each of the segments. So it's a paragraph, but I'm going to break it down into four segments. So the first segment, basically, in the African context, where there are always diverse number of ethnic groups within each nation state, social conflict can easily emerge. So what is happening there? We have the phrase basically. Basically is a cliche. It's a cliche word. What does basically mean? What does that word add to the sentence? To be very honest, not very much. In the African context, there are always a diverse number of ethnic groups. That's a lot of words to say there are many ethnic groups. Again, we say within each nation state. You could say either each nation or each state. The use of the two words together, there are certain contexts where the use of the two words together is very important. But for most people who are reading this, nation state might not be a very useful terminology. Let's take the next one. Obviously, they cannot be fully documented, but it is clear from the available research literature itself there is a problem of violence. Obviously, and so the phrase obviously in this paragraph, there are places where it can be used. But standing alone in this paragraph, the word obviously becomes a cliche phrase. But I'm more concerned about they. Who are they? If you look at the previous sentence, there are several groups or several things that can be the referent for they. It could be so. Does this sentence mean the social conflict, or the number of ethnic groups, or the ethnic groups themselves, or the nation state themselves? What is it that cannot be fully documented? The referent over there is not clear. And then extended go on to say, but it's clear from available research literature itself. That is a manner of speaking. It tends to be an East African, let me even say Kenyan way of speaking, the literature itself. That's a Bantu influence in the way that people would speak, and there are certain words in the different languages that one would use which somehow translate to the available research literature itself. It's clear from the research literature itself that there is a problem of violence. So we have some mother tongue influence there, or linguistic background influence. The next segment: in some countries, brutal violence was meted against civilians by militia groups and government forces themselves. That's again, influence of some of the languages, Bantu languages. And then violence was meted against civilians by militia groups and government forces themselves. And then it goes on to say they, and one wonders, okay, so they who? The militia groups, the civilians, or the government forces? Who is it who lost their lives or got physically injured? Some, who are they? So those are many words that could be condensed into a more compact, clearer sentence. The last segment, perhaps root of crisis is that these existing types and levels of conflicts and disharmonies diminish or threaten human dignity for all. So the sentence begins with perhaps, and has a typo there. We most likely should be the root, perhaps the root of the crisis. So perhaps means that the author is not sure about something. The author doesn't know, or somehow has a clue, or would like to suggest something. Perhaps the root of the crisis is that these existing types and levels of conflict. So what is it? Is it existing types of conflicts or existing levels of conflicts? What does it help the sentence to have both of those? Then he goes on to say types and levels of conflicts and disharmonies. So is the sentence about the conflicts or is it about the disharmonies? The sentence would be much stronger if he talked about one or the other one, but not to put both. These types and levels of conflicts and disharmonies diminish or threaten. So what do? Do they diminish or do they threaten human dignity for all? So this sentence has so many things going on. The sentence can't make up its mind what it is talking about, and it wants to include all these different ideas and be tentative about them. So that the paragraph taken together might communicate something. It has the paragraph has something to say, and it has something important to say, but its meaning is lost in the clarity. So let's break it down and let's see if we can rewrite this paragraph. So this first sentence, we want to remove the word basically. The word basically doesn't do anything for the sentence. And then, it says in the African context, one could say in Africa. We don't have to put the African context. It has a nice ring to it, but it doesn't really do a lot for the sentence. Where there are always a diverse number of ethnic groups, where there are diverse ethnic groups within each nation, social conflict easily emerges. So it's a smaller sentence, almost half the size, very clear. The sentence is moving somewhere. In Africa, where there are diverse ethnic groups within each nation, social conflict easily emerges. Let's look at the other segment. And this one says, obviously, they cannot be fully documented, but it is clear from available research literature itself that there's a problem of violence. Three things we need to do. The first one, we need to remove the cliche word out of that. We need to deal with the unclear referent. We need to know who is they or what is they, and then get rid of the mother tongue influence, the literature itself. And so this is what we come up with. So we condense the sentence. We say, while all conflict has not been fully documented, so we've decided that they is about conflict. While all conflict has not been fully documented, available research shows, and we've removed research literature because the assumption is the research is written down. So available research shows that violence is a problem. So instead of having there's a problem of violence, violence is a problem. And to prove for the reader that available research shows that violence is a problem, then we would cite someone. So we can cite the research itself or cite someone who has done research about research. Usually those are really good because then one can be able to, build your argument on someone who has actually taken the time and looked at all the research there is, or much of the research, and come to the conclusion that supports your argument. So while all conflict has not been fully documented, available research shows that violence is a problem. Cite something about that research. Oh, then we have these problematic sentences. And the sentences are very verbose, brutal violence, so many words going on. And then we have the government forces themselves. We have mother tongue influence there. We have an unclear referent. They lost their lives. We don't know who it is who lost their lives. So these three sentences all come together into a short, clear sentence. In some countries, militias, not just militia groups, but militias, you can use it as a plural. Some countries, militias and government forces mete out brutal force, maiming and killing many. And so one could even, add, maiming and killing many citizens or many civilians. So we condense that into something that is clearer. Last part of the paragraph. Perhaps root of the crisis that these existing types and levels of conflicts, we need to make this sentence, have a direction. This sentence needs to make a decision. And so we need a decisive. We need the sentence to go a particular direction. So this sentence is that the conflict. This sentence is about conflict, and conflict that has an effect on human dignity. And so we clear off all the other things that are going on, conflicts and disharmonies. We make a decision for conflicts, diminish or threaten. Let's talk about threatening, types and levels of conflicts. Let's just generalize that and talk about conflicts in general. So we end up with a sentence: the root of the crisis is that these conflicts threaten human dignity. Simple, straightforward. The root of the crisis is that the conflicts do something to human dignity. What do? They threaten human dignity. And from that sentence, what I can now do is either give a citation that says something more about this, or that allows someone to go and see, to go and study some more about this particular conclusion, or I can give evidence after that and explain in the next paragraph. So this verbose paragraph that had cliche words in it, that had unclear reference in it, that had mother tongue influence in it, that had indecisive sentences in it, becomes this. In Africa, where there are diverse ethnic groups within each nation, social conflict easily emerges. While all conflict has not been fully documented, available research shows that violence is a problem. In some countries, militias and government forces mete out brutal force, maiming and killing many. The root of the crisis is that these conflicts threaten human dignity. There are different ways this paragraph could be written, but what we've done with the paragraph is that we've demonstrated some of the challenges with the writing, but also presented this in a clear way. This is one of the ways. People who do this professionally could write this in any number of ways and even fine-tune the clarity even more. But this goes to show what you could do with your own writing. And so when you when you finish writing your piece, finish writing your assignment, or finish writing your paper, finish writing your abstract, and you read through it, you need to ask yourself, is it going to be clear to someone who is not from my context? And what are some of the ways in which I'm being verbose, or I'm using cliche, or I'm being unclear? And over time, what will happen is that as you write, as you continue to practice writing, as you continue to practice self-editing, and as you also help edit other people's work, then you become better at it. and then that way you can be the kind of author that we really would like you to be. At the end of the day, uh, African Theological Network Press and other publishers are looking for something material. We are looking for material that will say something and teach us something. And your own contribution to this can be highly enhanced by clear writing. And so those are some of the mistakes that we make. These are mistakes I've made myself and that have been pointed to me by others. And my hope is that this will be something that will be helpful for you as you do your own writing. So put them to practice. Put this to practice, and let us see what can come out of your own writing.